This is one of the strangest ones I've seen in a while, guys. Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. So the Gibson Garage, if you guys aren't familiar, it's Gibson's direct retail outlet. It's a pretty cool store. They have a lot of cool concerts and stuff there. But besides stocking all the base models, occasionally they get abandoned made-to-measures, the mod shop collection guitars that don't sell after a couple of weeks. Sometimes they just do their own weird, wacky made-to-measures just to see what will sell or to create hype within the store. And shout out to Foster. He works there, but he posts some of these on Instagram, so that's how I saw this one. It was a Metallica reel. It's like, okay, pretty basic stuff, and then, what is that? So let's go ahead and get into this thing, because no amount of preparation is going to make you ready to see this monstrosity. Oh my goodness. Yeah, this is a strange one. Now, for me personally, this screams 80s. Because we've got this really sparkly white finish. It's really not coming through on the camera too much. It's got a lot of blue and green to it. But you're gonna notice this is a Les Paul Custom that doesn't have binding, so it kind of makes it like a studio, but it's full thickness. This is a really heavy guitar. I think they said it was around 10.5 pounds. But if the no binding aspect wasn't interesting enough, take a look at this fretboard. It's unbound ebony, and when have you ever seen a Les Paul Custom have these style of inlays? Not very often. Perhaps the most famous model to use these style inlays are the Trini Lopez. You can also find them on the Gibson Super Strats of the late 80s, like the Gibson US1. So that's why I thought this one had some cool 80s vibes to it. And not only the inlay style, but we also have abalone instead of mother of pearl. So that gives it its own unique look. But we do have binding on the headstock. It's the only part that's bound on this entire guitar. You've got the black nut just to help blend in with your ebony fretboard. This is not a traditional guitar in the slightest, and that's why I had to document this thing. Because I'll be honest, it's not my favorite Les Paul I've ever seen, but it is crazy. And I've always wanted to see a unbound Les Paul be made in the custom shop, because I just thought it'd be funny to have a custom shop studio, essentially, even though, I mean, this is far from a studio. But you're also going to notice we have 3 uncovered pickups. So I might say that harkens back to Steve Clark of Def Leppard. Although this time it's a little bit more glam rocky with a sparkle white finish. And thankfully, we do not have a Kaler on this one. I might be curious about the history of this particular one. They didn't really say. However, let's see if the case candy can help us. So we've got our original box tag right here, and it reads Les Paul Custom Split Diamond Abalone No Binding Ebony 3 Pickup Gloss BC. And just the COA itself bills it as a Les Paul Custom. So I was thinking maybe this was something that the mod shop guys just kind of created, but no, it appears to be some sort of a made-to-measure. Because there is no mod and or demo stamp on this one. There we go, now the colored sparkles are showing through. So let's go ahead and throw this one on the workbench to see how they spec'd it out. So fun story as we take a look at this thing on the workbench. I had initially contacted them just to get some additional photos of this so I could do like a rock or not segment on it. But then they told me the price tag of $7,000 and it's like, all right, I guess I'll just have to do the full review and demo. But the cavities are looking pretty clean. You can see that cool sparkle white finish in them, as well as the long neck tenon. And looking at our cavity here, it does look like you can still just barely make out the maple top right there before you transition into the mahogany body. But as far as our pickups, it look like we're doing the 490R in the neck, with the same 490R in the middle, and then another 490R in the bridge? No, 498T. And as far as our bridge and tailpiece setup here, it's your regular Nashville style bridge. So that means at the base, this is just a regular Les Paul Custom. So that'd be $5,000 brand new. So you got about a $2,000 upcharge for the crazy exotic multi-chrome sparkle finish and your different abalone inlays. But you might say, hey, they didn't have to do all the binding work. Was this really worth it? Only in the guitar market, because now it's a weird one-off that maybe in the future could become collectible. However, I don't know. Let's keep looking at the specs, because I'm personally curious how they had this wired up. Is it going to be the traditional neck, bridge, and then bridge and middle together, or is it going to be like a blending system? Let's find out. 13.84 k ohms in the bridge position. Neck is 7.78, so that's traditional. What do we got going on here? 5.03. And after fiddling with it, it's the way I like it. So you have 2 volumes and 2 tones as is normal. This was always a popular modification to do to white Les Paul Studios, is to black them all out because then it gives it a Stormtrooper vibe, you know, Star Wars. This one's a little bit more of a sparkly Stormtrooper. And what's interesting, all this sparkle flake within the finish, you don't actually feel it on the top, but if you run your finger along the edge, you can feel it right there because it's just a natural curving point where that clear top coat hasn't quite obscured all of them. That's kind of interesting because normally binding would negate that effect. It's not a bad thing. It's just something I thought I'd bring up. But not having the pickguard on really makes this look like a Les Paul Studio. So I think we'll slap that right back on there. But if you notice, we do have the more 57 style knobs instead of just having speed knobs like normal. But now moving on to the ebony fretboard, it's nice and clean. You don't have all those tooling marks because they didn't have to mess with doing binding here. But there's a lot of guys that just don't like binding on guitars, and that's why they don't like Les Paul Customs, or even standards for that matter. So this is a great one for somebody like that. I suppose another option they could have took on this guitar is black binding, but these abalone inlays are quite cool. Even the side markers are also abalone. They look a little bit larger than normal. However, this is definitely a very thick finish because there's a pretty pronounced ridge between where the finish ends and the fretboard begins just because it's kind of piled up a little bit. It's not uncomfortable though, it's a very smooth transition. But we've got a regular 24 3/4 inch scale length. That's a shame. This guitar could pull off a 25.5 and has a 12-inch fretboard radius. Again, another guitar that probably could have pulled off a compound radius, making it super ultra modern. Honestly, I'm really shocked they didn't put a Floyd Rose on here or make this a Access custom. I would like to see an Access done up like this. But our nut width is 1.69 inches. That increases to 2.08 by the 12th. First fret neck depth of 0.86 and just about 1 by the 12th. Here's a look at that on the contour gauge. First fret and 12th fret. Stays very consistent. Medium C. I really like the headstock on this one though. They chose some very choice abalone, which if you're not familiar, it's just a different kind of shell. So mother of pearl usually has like some blues in it, but it mainly appears white. Abalone has a lot more color and figuring to it. It's kind of an acquired taste. Truss rod looks good on this one, and you just have a regular Les Paul Custom truss rod cover. Moving on to the back now, let's take a look at the electronics. Looking like pretty basic Gibson wiring here to me. Nothing too fancy. But since this one was made in 2022, we still have the 70th anniversary medallion back here. And you just got more of this interesting finish. It really does not come across too well in video. I mean, it's got some green, it's got some red, it's got a little bit of like pink kind of blend into it. But here's the thing about Gibson sparkle finishes, they always finish crack around the neck. You get finish checking everywhere pretty much. So it might look good now, but trust me, you will get finish checking on this eventually. It is only a matter of time. Sparkle and glitter flake with nitro finishes, they just don't mix too well. And you know, this one not having binding, that might help it stand the test of time a little bit longer because there's fewer areas moving on the guitar with temperature and humidity changes. But when the garage guys were first sending me photos, I thought they were telling me this was like a Les Paul special flat top, but no, it does still have the carved maple top to it. You can see a little bit of a belly there. We can run up the back of the neck. Nothing too different, just says Gibson Custom back here. Kind of surprised we don't have locking tuners on this. They're just black Grovers, and our serial number dates it to 2022, and pretty late in the year, 3,108th guitar made. But all said and done, yep, that's a chunky one, just under 10.5 pounds. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how it sounds. thing is bitey. Love that bridge pickup. This was definitely meant for like 80s metal stuff. That's a lot of fun. It really does kind of feel like playing a studio, but a little bit higher end. And you might think that as a bad thing, but I actually really enjoy playing studios because they don't have all the binding. So to have a custom shop made instrument having that slightly higher edge of quality and materials, you know, this thing definitely has a vibe now. I suppose we should get some clean tones. Very nice and bitey in that neck position. That bridge just wants to rip your head off. It sounds great, even clean, because it's like really dirty. Now, of course, you can also lighten up your pick attack. But I love the middle position on 3 pickup customs that are wired traditionally. You don't have any of that blending stuff, so technically less tonal opportunities, but I just love this kind of stratty sounding tone. Now that we know all about this interesting made-to-measure one-off strange guitar with awesome specs, what are my final thoughts on this thing? You know, I wasn't too sure going into this. I just wanted to document it because it was so unique. But my goodness, this is a great player. It really captures that simplistic but yet highly fancy and custom shop all at the same time. So I'll agree with you, maybe the looks aren't for everybody, but if you're in like a glam rock 80s hair metal style band, I think this would fit in place pretty well. Unbound ebony fretboards have always been some of my favorites. Like, you can also find this on very early SG standards in the 70s. So to have abalone mixed in there with some fancy inlays, I mean, why not? It's not traditional, but that's what my show's all about, documenting the non-traditional stuff because it's fun. Alright, Troglodytes, I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode. If you might be interested in being the next owner of this one, you can find it on my website. But otherwise, we will catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care. If you enjoyed tonight's oddball guitar, you might enjoy the Super Standard. It was a NAMM show display piece in 1979.